She had signed off on million-dollar deals without blinking, laid off entire departments with a steady voice, and built a reputation for being impossible to surprise. But that night, as she stood by the tinted glass of her executive office watching the cleaning crew move through the floor below, something unsettled her. One woman lingered longer than the rest. She worked slowly, deliberately, like every movement mattered. And without knowing it, she was about to pull the CEO into a decision that would follow her for the rest of her life. The janitor arrived every evening just after 9. A black single mother, quiet, early 30s, hair pulled back, eyes always alert. Her uniform was spotless. Her work was flawless. No complaints, no small talk, no shortcuts. She cleaned offices no one else wanted, stayed late when others rushed out, and clocked out last every night. Most people didn't know her name. The CEO did, only because she had memorized it after seeing it pop up repeatedly in internal logs tied to maintenance alerts that somehow got resolved without tickets ever being filed. What first caught the CEO's attention wasn't the work ethic, it was the pauses. The janitor would stop in conference rooms and stare at whiteboards covered in strategic diagrams. She'd tilt her head, narrow her eyes, and sometimes shake her head as if something didn't sit right. Once, the CEO rewound a security clip 3 times to be sure. The janitor had quietly erased a small section of a board and rewritten a formula more cleanly before stepping back and continuing to mop the floor. Curiosity replaced routine. The CEO started checking cameras more often, telling herself it was about security. But she was watching one person. Night after night, the pattern repeated. The janitor corrected mistakes no one noticed. She organized scattered documents before discarding trash. She read reports left behind, fast, focused, hungry. This wasn't coincidence. This was someone thinking far beyond the job she was paid to do. Still, the CEO did nothing. She told herself it wasn't her place. Everyone had a story. She had built her life on discipline, not distractions. But one evening, as she was preparing to leave late herself, she saw the janitor clock out, shoulders heavy, feet slow. On impulse she hadn't felt in years, the CEO grabbed her coat and followed at a distance. The city looked different from the passenger seat of her luxury car when she wasn't being driven somewhere important. The janitor walked, carrying a worn backpack, stopping briefly at a corner store just before closing to buy discounted food. She counted coins. She thanked the cashier softly. Then she kept walking. Not toward the housing blocks the CEO expected, but deeper into a neighborhood she had only ever passed through with the windows up. Janitor stopped at a small, aging building with a flickering light over the door. A community center. The CEO parked across the street, heart pounding for reasons she didn't fully understand. She watched as the janitor unlocked the door and stepped inside. Minutes later, children poured toward her, laughter echoing through the open windows. The janitor knelt to hug them, took bags from their hands, and ushered them in with practiced ease. The CEO got out of her car without thinking. She stood near the entrance, unseen, listening. Inside, the janitor was no longer quiet. Her voice was calm but confident, guiding kids through homework, breaking down problems, encouraging questions. On a cracked whiteboard, she sketched complex ideas with ease, translating them into something the children could grasp. This wasn't volunteering. This was teaching. Real teaching. The kind that came from deep understanding and lived experience. The CEO felt something tighten in her chest. She realized she wasn't witnessing kindness alone. She was witnessing capability that had been buried, ignored, and wasted. And for the first time in years, she felt ashamed not of what she had done, but of what she had never bothered to see. She returned to her car and drove home in silence, the city lights blurring past her windshield. That night, sleep never came. Every achievement she had ever celebrated felt suddenly incomplete. Somewhere between the boardroom and that small community center, a truth had been waiting for her. And now that she had seen it, there was no turning back. The CEO arrived at the office earlier than usual the next morning, but nothing felt familiar. Glass walls, the polished floors, the quiet hum of power that once comforted her now felt hollow. She replayed the night over and over. The children, the lessons, the way the janitor's voice carried authority without arrogance. It wasn't just talent she had seen, it was purpose. And the unsettling realization that her own company had been walking past it every single night. She tried to bury herself in work, emails, reports, meetings stacked back to back, but every discussion about efficiency and innovation felt detached from reality. When her executives praised a new hiring pipeline, she thought about the woman who had corrected formulas no one else noticed. When someone spoke about community outreach, she pictured the flickering light above that worn community center door. The contrast was unbearable. That evening, the CEO stayed late again. She didn't turn on the cameras this time. She waited. When the janitor appeared, pushing her cart down the hallway, the CEO stepped out of her office. The woman froze, eyes widening, instinctively bracing for criticism. She stood there in silence, separated by rank, race, and years of unspoken assumptions. The CEO spoke first, carefully. She didn't mention the following. She didn't mention the cameras. She asked a simple question. Why do you pause at the whiteboards? The janitor hesitated, then lowered her gaze. She said she liked to understand how things work. Nothing more. The CEO pressed gently. Where did you learn that level of math? The answer came after a long pause. I used to be an engineer. The words landed like a confession and a warning at the same time. The janitor explained quietly. A degree earned with honors. A job lost after taking time off to care for a sick partner. Medical bills that grew faster than opportunities. A child who needed stability more than pride. The janitor job wasn't a failure. It was survival. Flexible hours. Health insurance. No questions asked. The CEO listened without interrupting. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like the smartest person in the room. She felt like the most ignorant. When the janitor finished, she apologized, not for the company, but for herself. For not seeing, for not asking, for allowing a system to reward visibility instead of value. The next days passed quietly, but plans were forming. CEO didn't announce anything. She didn't want a performance. She met with legal, HR, and department heads privately. She asked uncomfortable questions. How many people had been screened out because their resumes didn't look right? How often did internal talent go unnoticed because it came from the wrong place? The answers made it worse. When the offer finally came, it wasn't dramatic. A meeting in a small conference room. No audience. Role built around the janitor's actual skills, not her job title. Support for childcare, training updates, a salary that reflected contribution, not background. Janitor didn't say yes right away. She had learned that promises often came with condition. Trust wasn't something she could afford to give easily. Weeks passed. The janitor continued working nights, teaching evenings, living carefully. Then one night, she accepted. Not because of the money, but because of the chance to change things from the inside. Her first request surprised the CEO. She wanted to help redesign how the company identified talent. Just for her. For people who would never be followed home by a curious executive. The CEO agreed without hesitation. She understood now. Leadership wasn't about control. It was about accountability. Company began to change, quietly but deeply. New pathways opened. Voices were heard. And the CEO learned the most important lesson of her career. The greatest discoveries aren't made in boardrooms. They're made when you stop looking down on people and start looking closely at them.